I hear from the forest, "Get the f*** off my property!" This weekend, I went down to Virginia with my friend Mark. My plans for this weekend switched a lot. I was originally going to Buffalo to see the eclipse on Monday, and then I was like, well, I'll turn that into a fishing trip, and I'll fish that weekend with friends, and then, meet with everyone for the eclipse on Monday. And then I was like, well, people canceled, things didn't happen. And so then we were like, all right, well, we'll make it just a fishing trip. We won't even go see the eclipse. And then it was going to rain a bunch in New York. And so I was like, okay, you know what? I'm over it. We're going to Virginia. And so Mark and I, my friend Mark and I, also another life lister, a person who looks for new fish species, decided to go to Virginia and decided to hit up a bunch of spots to try and find fish. And we had a lot of interesting things happen and a lot of cool fish. We did not get arrested this time, but we did get screamed at in the middle of the night by a very angry man who we could not see from the forest. So a lot happened in this story, okay? So we started heading down to Virginia. We made a stop on the way, okay? And the first thing that we targeted was called a silver jaw minnow, which was about 4 hours into the drive on the area in between Maryland and Virginia. And we thought we had caught a bunch of silver jaw minnows. We took some pictures and then we left for the night. Turns out they were not in fact silver jaw minnow. They were all mimic shiner, which of course all look like silver jaw minnow. Mimic shiners mimic everything else. So it turns out we didn't even catch that. So we started the trip off on a big fail, but we didn't even know that until we got back recently, okay? Then we headed down to Maryland, and the first thing we did was... It's a good question. What was the first thing that we did in Maryland? I think we tried to catch longfin darter. So in New Jersey, we have something called tessellated darter. And a lot of the United States has tessellated darter or Johnny darter. And these are these like pretty ugly, even when colorful, they're just kind of dark darters. But there are darters closely related to them called longfin darter, which are exceptionally beautiful. You'll see, if I show you the male and female here, the female just looks like a tessellated darter. They're quite ugly. They're just, the typical tessellated darter thing. You can see a hint of like iridescence on the scales, but that's about it. But the longfin, the male, is crazy. And this is probably one of the craziest fish I've ever caught in terms of color. You can see the beautiful long second dorsal fin up there. You can see all of the beautiful iridescent on the fish, all the crazy colors, how dark everything is. I mean, this is an unedited photo. This is like absolutely ridiculous. The orange spottings on the fins. It's an absolutely gorgeous photo. Incredible fish, real big highlight of the trip. It was really cool. It was just a little creek in a park, and we caught it at like dawn at like 5 a.m. or something. And we're just like in people's backyards at a park in this tiny stream, like a really tiny stream, catching things this gorgeous. Got very lucky with that because Mark also caught a longfin darter. I actually found it for him and then he caught it. And his was not as pretty. This was his. Still pretty, still a colored up male, but not quite the same as the ridiculous thing that I caught here, which was pretty crazy. So it was a very beautiful, good way to start the trip. Good way to counteract us failing in Maryland, I suppose. Unfortunately, that would probably be the last time that we had good luck for the whole trip. We tried a few other things. We went to this one spot where I actually did pretty well. Mark did not do so well. I caught this spawning stone roller. Stone roller are a really common fish, okay? And they get all decently large, but you rarely see giant ones. This is a giant colored up male stone roller, and on his face you'll see tubercles. He has these little tubercles, these bumps on his head that he uses to fight other males. All of these spikes on his head like a dinosaur that he uses to fight other males when it comes to breeding season. And you'll also notice this calloused beak of a mouth that he has. This is not normally what a stone roller's mouth looks like. They typically have a normal fish mouth. He has built up a gigantic callus on his lips from picking up so many rocks to build a nest. Imagine using your lips to build like such a giant nest with so many rocks that you grow giant calluses on your lips. I mean, think about how long it takes you to build calluses on your hands from doing like rough work, and building calluses that big. Now imagine doing on that. And this was an over 8-inch fish. This is a ridiculous specimen of a stone roller, which is really cool to find. I also got a torrent sucker, the Bernia, which is a genus that I did not have, so that's pretty cool. New, genus of sucker that's only down there. I think there's only 2 at the Bernia, which is pretty cool. That spot went well for me. Did not go so well for Mark. I use a dip net. Mark uses a handheld rod to try and catch like little fish, and so he holds the bait in front of them and tries to get them to take it. And all of the sucker species, although there were many of them, they were not cooperative. So we would see them in the water, something like this. So we were headlamping in the middle of the night, and you'll see something like this sitting on the bottom, okay? And this is a torrent sucker. And so I have to figure out how to net this without it getting away from me. It's not a super shallow stream, so it's pretty difficult to catch this thing with a dip net. Mark presents bait in front of it. They were not taking the bait this night. He had a rough time. We ended up staying here for probably about 4 hours. It was pretty rough. How'd you take such good photos at night? My camera, my very expensive camera that I lost in the mud in the last story and have a new one now, is very good at adjusting for light. It's just good at adjusting for light. But I'm also wearing a headlamp, so it's not that dark in like the direction that I'm looking in particular. I also caught a giant Nokomis that we think is a bull chub, but we're not totally sure about that yet, which is pretty cool. These are the main mound builders. These guys take stones and they build giant rock piles that all of the minnows end up having babies on. Like all of the minnows in this area rely on these guys in order to have their reproductive seasons. They have their spawning seasons because these guys build giant nests and all the other minnows just throw their shit on it. Sperms, egg, whatever. And so you end up with all sorts of weird hybrids. And during the breeding season, you get it's just really amazing if you can snorkel on a chub mound. If you ever have that opportunity, if you have Nokomis near you and you can find a chub mound, snorkel on it. It's incredible. You'll see the most beautiful shiners in the world. And one of those beautiful shiners that we were hoping to see was a mountain red belly dace. Now, mountain red belly dace get ridiculously pretty, okay? I'd have to find an example. This isn't the best photo, but this is an example of how crazy they get with this red and yellow and then the black on their bottom half. When these guys are on the chub mounds, they're incredibly beautiful. And so we were hoping to find one of that beauty caliber. Of course, that did not quite happen. Here's a gorgeous one. Here's another gorgeous one. They get incredible. These are just incredibly beautiful fish. So we were hoping to find something like this. Unfortunately, we did not come across one that beautiful. We found not horribly unpretty ones. This is Mark's. This is mine. They did have some red, as you can see. They were planning to color up. Mine had some yellow and green on the fins too, and some red on the top. But these were not quite as nice. This is iNaturalist, the website. All of my photos I post on iNaturalist, and so does everyone. So that's where I go to reference all of this stuff. This is my photo. This is Mark's photo. We didn't do bad. They were getting ready to color up, probably. These guys were getting ready for spawning season. But I think we were a bit too early, so they hadn't gotten colorful yet. Because they will turn on the color when it comes to spawning season. They're not that colorful all year round. It's the kind of thing that they turn on when it's time to get colorful. Okay? And then we go to this amazing spot. Really cool. I think it was part of the Roanoke River, okay? And I'm doing great at this spot. We're catching all sorts of crazy stuff. First of all, I'm in a pool of giant sucker. This is like a 1.5 foot long red horse sucker. This is a giant sucker. And I'm in this pool, and they're swarming me like sharks because it's a fairly small pool, and they can't get out of it because it's a riffle on either side. And so they're just all swimming around. There's like 10 of these giant suckers swimming around, hitting me on the legs, hitting me on the chest, just like running into me over and over again. And so I just was like, hey, let's see what happens. And I stick my net in the water, kick in a direction, and a sucker ends up in my net. And so I got a giant golden red horse, which is pretty cool. The biggest sucker I've caught by a while. Also got some pretty scarlet shiners. This is a reasonably pretty male. The crazy male that I caught was this one. Really nice iridescence on the sides, as you can see, and then the scarlet on the fins. So that's a pretty nice fish that I caught. And then the cool thing that was in this river that we were targeting was a close relative of the longfin. You'll remember how pretty the longfin darter was. Well, there's a close relative one river over called the riverweed darter. And so we were targeting riverweed darter, and we caught, right at the end, a really pretty one. So I caught some ugly ones throughout the night. So this is an ugly female riverweed darter. You can tell it's a riverweed, not a tessellated, by all of this patterning on the tail and on the fins, and then this like on the top of the dorsal fin here. It's pretty clearly a riverweed, but it's an ugly riverweed as far as that go. But then we catch one nice riverweed, one nice one. And you might be wondering, shit, if this is a nice riverweed, why did you take such an ugly picture? Okay, why didn't you take a better picture of it? And the answer is quite simple. As I pulled this riverweed out of the river, okay, and I go to put it in my photo tank to take a picture, I hear from the forest, "Get the fuck off my property!" Like, oh my God, my voice. I can't even replicate. It was so loud. This guy was like 5 feet away from me in the forest to my left and screamed like out loud profanity, "Get the fuck, you are on fucking private property, get the fuck." Now, let me preface this by saying we were not on private property. This river flowed through a park, okay? In all fairness to the person, this is nighttime. Mark and I are wearing headlamps and we're talking to each other. So in all fairness to the person, he probably lives somewhere nearby, heard voices outside his house, and then saw lights flashing or something like that. And so he, did his typical Southern man thing and got defensive about his property and went out to, go scare us off. And I very much got that vibe that he was just like yelling at us. He didn't want to talk or anything like that. Like I don't think he was actually angry. I think he wanted to seem angry to scare us off because he, in the middle of the night, it's scary to go out there and be like, "Hey guys, what are you doing? I'm like my property, like you're a little close to my house, So instead, he just went with a full aggression approach. And so this was the only picture I got of the riverweed darter as this guy is screaming, "Get the fuck out of here! Get the fuck out of this river! It's fucking private property, you fucks!" And we're like, "All right, man, we're leaving." And we're trying to walk out to get out back to the park. Even though, again, this is not private property. This is a publicly owned river. That this part of the river goes through a park. It's all publicly owned. Whatever. If someone yells at you in the middle of the night, especially in the southern United States, you get out of there, okay? Because we couldn't see him. All we could see was a light in the forest, and we could hear his voice. So he could have had a gun, who knows? Didn't want to deal with it, so we're just leaving. And we're like trying to climb up the riverbank on the other side to get out, and he's still screaming at us, slurring, sending profanities. So needless to say, even though I caught a beautiful riverweed darter, I did not end up taking good photos of it because this was my safety photo. Before I take nice photos, I always take a safety photo in case something happens. Usually the something that happens is the fish jumps out of my hands and gets away from me or something like that. In this case, the something that happened was a very angry southern man in the forest. So I'm glad I got a safety photo, but I did not end up getting better photos of the riverweed, which is unfortunate. We probably would have caught a really pretty one if we had some more time there. But alas, the southern man strikes again. Got a few other colorful darters while I was there, including Roanoke darter. Not great pictures, fins not up, but you can see how fat they are. Pretty cute. I'm a big fan of them. Then we went to this fast-flowing river spot where I caught a ton of not sand darter, what I thought were sand darter at the time, but ended up being glassy darter. These are these like crazy elongate darters that have just evolved completely separately from sand darters and crystal darters, have just evolved to be really long and live in the in the fast flowing waters on sand. Yes, I do listen to Birds with Merlin and eBird. I got 3 bird lifers during this in Virginia as well. So these are really cool. These glassy darters. So I caught a bunch of them. Mark was trying to catch one. He was unsuccessful, did not end up catching one. And then we hit a few more swamp spots. I ended up getting my lifer flyer, which is a type of sunfish that we don't have in New Jersey. Got a really pretty one with the extended fin and all. So that was really cool. Hopefully, it's a lifer, so it's cool. Just nice to get a lifer. Also caught a white catfish and another flyer and all that. And then we headed north and we tried to find glassy darter for Mark in Delmarva in the Delaware, Maryland, Virginia Peninsula. There's a spot where there's still supposedly glassy darter, where they have, you know, they're sitting in these like sort of sandy, murky rivers. I don't understand how they're surviving there, but they are surviving there. We didn't end up finding one. We did catch, or we saw this, which is a striped mud turtle, which is really cool. As I'm taking this photo, by the way, he is musking in my hand, meaning he is releasing a substance that smells absolutely awful. I smelt it and nearly threw up, because like musk turtles, they secrete. You can actually even kind of see it. No, you can't. That's on the side. But on my finger, he let it go out the bottom of his shell. He let out some musk, which is lovely. Well, it was cool to see it because that's a turtle I've never seen before. We don't have striped mud turtle in New Jersey. And yeah, there were a lot of fish we came across. There's a lot of fish I could talk about. Some very colorful fantails and all that. But that's pretty much the highlights. That's the interesting stuff. Here's what a glassy darter looks like underwater. I took an underwater photo after I let them go in the river. So they're really hard to see from above, but that's what they look like. Tried for some other fish that I didn't end up getting, like swamp fish and that kind of thing. Got some pretty darters, some pretty fantails. I hadn't seen such like giant and pretty fantails, which is cool, but that's about it for the Virginia trip. It was a good weekend. I had a great weekend with my friend Mark. Had a good time. Didn't get arrested. Did get screamed at in the middle of the night by a Virginia man, but didn't get arrested.